Welcome back to Suspicious Nights. Today, we'll continue the journey with Stephen King's The Mist. Hope you'll enjoy. Chapter 2. After the Storm, Norton, a Trip to Town.
GPS,
Billy said. He was standing by the fence that separates our property from Norton's and looking down our driveway. The driveway runs a quarter of a mile to a camp road which in its turn runs about 3/4 of a mile to a stretch of 2-lane blacktop called Kansas Road. The Kansas Road, you can go anywhere you want, as long as it's Bridgeton. I saw what Billy was looking at and my heart went cold. Don't go any closer, champ. Right there is close enough. Billy didn't argue. The morning was bright and as clear as a bell. The sky, which had been a mushy, hazy color during the heat wave, had regained a deep, crisp blue that was nearly autumnal. There was a light breeze, making cheerful sun dapples move back and forth in the drive. Not far from where Billy was standing, there was a steady hissing noise, and in the grass there was what you might at first have taken for a breathing bundle of snakes. The power lines leading to our house had fallen into an untidy tangle about 20 feet away and lay in a burnt patch of grass. They were twisting lazily and spitting. If the trees and grass hadn't been so completely damped down by torrential rains, the house might have gone up. As it was, there was only that black patch where the wires had touched directly.
Could that electrocute a person, Daddy?
Yeah, it could.
What are we going to do about it?
Nothing. Wait for the CMP.
And when will they come?
I don't know. 5 years have so many questions as Hallmarks had cards. I imagine they're pretty busy this morning. Want to take a walk up to the end of the driveway with me? He started to come and then stopped, eyeing the wires nervously. One of them humped up and turned over lazily as if beckoning.
Daddy, can electricity shoot through the ground?
A fair question. But don't worry. Electricity wants the ground, not you, Billy. You'll be all right if you stay away from the wires.
Wants the ground,
He muttered, and then came to me. We walked up the driveway holding hands. It was worse than I had imagined. Trees had fallen across the drive in 4 different places. One of them small, 2 of them middling, and 1 old baby that must have been 5 feet through the middle. Moss was crusted onto it like a moldy corset. Branches, some half stripped of their leaves, lay everywhere in jagstra profusion. Billy and I walked to the camp road, tossing the smaller branches off into the woods on either side. It reminded me of a summer's day that had been maybe 25 years before. I couldn't have been much older than Billy was now. All my uncles had been there, and they had spent the day in the woods with axes and hatchets and Darcy poles, cutting brush. Later that afternoon, they had all sat down to the trestle picnic table my dad and mom used to have, and there had a monster meal of hot dogs and hamburgers and potato salad. The Gansett beer had flowed like water, and my uncle Reuben took a dive into the lake with all his clothes on, even his deck shoes. In those days, there were still deer in the woods.
Daddy, can I go down the lake?
He was tired of throwing branches, and the thing to do with a little boy when he's tired is to let him go do something else. Sure, I said. We walked back to the house together, and then Billy cut right, going around the house and giving the downed wires a large berth. I went left into the garage to get my McCullough. As I had suspected, I could already hear the unpleasant song of the chainsaw up and down the lake. I topped up the tank, took off my shirt, and was starting back up the driveway when Steph came out. She eyed the down trays lying across the driveway nervously.
How bad it is?
I can cut it up. How bad is it in there?
Well, I got the glass cleaned up, but you're going to have to do something about that tree, David. We can't have a tree in the living room.
No, I guess we can't. We looked at each other in the morning sunlight and got giggling. I set the McCullough down on the cement areaway and kissed her, holding her buttocks firmly.
Don't. Billy's
He came tearing round the corner of the house just then.
Dad, Daddy, you ought to see the...
Steffi saw the live wires and screamed for him to watch out. Billy, who was a good distance away from them, pulled up short and stared at his mother, as if she had gone mad.
I'm okay, Mom.
He said in a careful tone of voice you used to placate the very old and senile. He walked towards us, showing us how all right he was, and Steph began to tremble in my arms. It's all right. He knows about them, I said.
Yes, but people get killed. They have ads all the time on television about live wires. People get... Billy! I want you to come in their house right now.
Oh, come on, Mom. I want to show Dad the boathouse.
He was almost bug-eyed with excitement and disappointment. He had gotten the taste of a post-storm apocalypse and wanted to share it.
You go in right now. Those wires are dangerous and...
Dad said they want the ground, not me.
Billy, don't argue with me.
I'll come down and look, champ. Go on down yourself. I could feel Steph tensing against me. Go around the other side, kiddo.
Yeah, okay,
said Billy. He tore past us, taking the stone steps that led around the west end of the house, 2 by 2. He disappeared with his shirt tail flying, trailing back onward. Wow! As he spotted some other piece of destruction. He knows about the wires, Steffi. I took her gently by her shoulders. He's scared of them. That's good. It makes him safe. One tear tracked down her cheek.
David, I'm scared.
Come on, it's over.
Is it last winter and the late spring? They call it a black spring in town. They say there hadn't been one in this part since 1888.
They undoubtedly meant Mrs. Carmody, who kept the Bridgeton Antiquary, a junk shop that Steph liked to rummage around in sometimes. Billy loved to go with her. In one of the shadowy, dusty back rooms, stuffed owls with gold-ringed eyes spread their wings forever as their feet endlessly scratched varnished logs. Stuffed raccoons stood in a trio around the stream that was a long fragment of dusty mirror, and one moth-eaten wolf, which was foaming sawdust instead of saliva around his muzzle, snarled a creepy eternal snarl. Mrs. Carmody claimed the wolf was shot by her father as it came to drink from Stevens Brook one September afternoon in 1901. The expeditions to Mrs. Carmody Antiquary Shop worked well for my wife and son. She was into carnival glass and he was into death in the name of taxidermy. But I thought that the old woman exercised a rather unpleasant hold over Steph's mind, which was in all other ways practical and hard-headed. She had found Steph's vulnerable spot, a mental Achilles heel. Nor was Steph the only one in town who was fascinated by Mrs. Carmody's Gothic pronouncements and folk remedies. Stumpwater would take off bruises if your husband was the sort who got a bit too free with his fists and after 3 drinks. You could tell what kind of a winter was coming by counting the rings on the caterpillars in June or by measuring the thickness of August honeycomb. And now, good God protect and preserve us, the Black Spring of 1888. I had also heard the story. It's one they like to pass around up here. If the spring is cold enough, the ice on the lakes will eventually turn as black as a rotten tooth. It's rare, but hardly a once-in-a-century occurrence. They like to pass it around, but I doubt that many could pass it around as much conviction as Mrs. Carmody. We had a hard winter and a late spring, I said. Now we are having a hot summer, and we had the storm, but it's over. You are not acting like yourself, Stephanie.
That wasn't an ordinary storm.
No, I'll go along with you there. I had heard the Black Spring story from Bill Gaiusty, who owned and operated after a fashion Gaiusty's Mobile in Casco Village. Bill ran the place with his 3 tosspot sons. Bill was 70, looked 80, and could still drink like a 23-year-old when the mood was on him. Bill and I had taken the Scout in for a fill cup the day after a surprise mid-May storm dropped nearly a foot of wet, heavy snow on the region, covering the new grass and flowers. Gayasti had been in his cups for fair and happy to pass along the Black Spring story, along with his own original twist. Now we get snow in May sometimes, it comes and it's gone 2 days later. It's no big deal. Steffi was glancing doubtfully at the downed wires again.
When will the power company come?
Just as soon as they can. It won't be long. I just don't want you to worry about Billy. His head is on pretty straight. He forgets to pick up his clothes, but he isn't going to go and step on a bunch of live lines. He's got a good, healthy dose of self-interest. I touched the corner of her mouth and it obliged by turning in the beginning of a smile. Better?
You always make it seem better.
She said, and made me feel good. From the lakeside of the house, Billy was yelling for us to see. Come on, let's go and take a look at the damage. She snorted ruefully.
If I want to look at damage, I can go sit in my living room.
Make a little kid happy then? We walked down the stone steps, hand in hand. We had just reached the first turn in them when Billy came from the other direction at speed, almost knocking us over.
You gotta see.
Billy panted.
The boathouse is all bashed. There's a dock on the rocks and trees in the boat cove. Jesus Christ.
Having spoken, the doomsayer departs, I said, and that made Steph giggle again. Listen, after I cut up those trees across the driveway, I'll go by the Central Main Power Office on Portland Road. Tell me what we got, okay?
Okay. When do you think you can go?
Except for the big tree, the one with the moldy corset of moss, it would have been an hour's walk. With a big one added in, I didn't think the job would be done until 11 or so.
I'll give you lunch here, then. But you'll have to get some things at the market for me. We're almost out of milk and butter. Also, I have to make you a list.
Give a woman a disaster, and she turns a squirrel. I gave her a hug and nodded. We went on around the house. It didn't take more than a glance to understand why Billy had been a little overwhelmed. Thank you for listening to the first part of the second chapter of The Mist. Stay tuned for the upcoming episode.